extending a warm welcome to those visiting us today, making the time to spend their evening with us. My name is Ravina Sangera. I'm Vice Provost and Dean of Students. I'm also referred to as a lifer on campus. I was a student in 1999 and I just never left. But don't worry, did end up getting a mortgage, buying a car, and doing all those life things. I just come here all the time. And two things you should know about me is that I have a little bit of a tickle in my throat, allergies. Part of my self-care is walking 3-4 times a day, so I'm inhaling pollen left and right, so I have my water there. And the second thing you need to know about me, and that my team already knows about me, is that my cell phone always goes off. My mom forgot that I'm not 14 anymore, and she likes to check in on me regularly, even though I'm in my 40s. So those are two things I hope that don't distract you this evening. So as we begin, the University of Alberta is located on Treaty 6 territory and respects the histories, languages, and cultures of First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and all First Peoples of Canada, whose way of caring for people and the land is a practice of philanthropy delivered with a love and compassion that predates settler arrival and continues to enrich our vibrant community today. I would like to recognize that as we bring this group of women together, we are inclusive of all women and gender diverse people. We are committed to promoting equity, diversity, and inclusion, and acknowledge the intersectionality and the role it plays in each woman's unique lived experience and philanthropic values. So once again, thank you all for joining us this evening. First, I'd like to acknowledge all of our tremendous donors here, whether you have supported us through your time, your talent, or your treasure. We see your impact on students and researchers every day. I should know that, I'm a lifer here. My home location is the Faculty of Pharmacy and Pharmaceutical Sciences, and we are definitely lucky to have the donors that we do. I'd also like to acknowledge our Kai Kam Kavera Honor Society members in the audience today. By providing for the university in your estate plans, you show the utmost trust and confidence in our commitment to education and research, and to the impact the university makes on a local, national, and global level. This evening is an opportunity to celebrate the incredible impact of women's philanthropy. It's a time to reflect on the progress we have made, the challenges we still face, and the immense potential we hold as change makers. Our actions, big or small, have the power to create a ripple effect that can bring about positive change in our communities, our society, and the world. When women come together to support causes they are passionate about, their collective strength becomes unstoppable. Whether it is addressing gender inequality, promoting access to education, or championing environmental sustainability, women's philanthropy has the power to reshape our world. So with that being said, I'd humbly like to share my story here. The privilege of being able to share my story on this platform is not lost on me, and I honor the space that I'm in today. In my role as Dean of Students, 9 months steady with a few bumps along the way, but I hear bumps really strengthen those core muscles. We are in a state of reimagining the student experience. We are in a state of learning, unlearning, and relearning. At this moment in time, it's our collective opportunity to impact the student experience at the University of Alberta. It is the diverse voices that will determine how the university can lead with purpose. And if I can respectfully reference Dr. Glanfield and the Office of the Vice Provost, Indigenous Programming and Research, and our strategic plan, Braiding Past, Present, and Future, we will reimagine the student experience while honoring those who came before us, those here today, and appreciating the collective responsibility to the generations to come. You are part of this reimagining. When you share your story with us, you share your gifts with us, never underestimate the ripples that emerge from your impact and action. I'll share my story and how the ripples from that first time I stepped on this campus in 1999 are traveling outwards from that moment. So I'll give you a moment to look at these pictures. The pictures on these slides showcase my story. My family roots are in farming of wheat, corn, sugarcane from the village of Bilga, which is located in Punjab, northern India. So Bilga is described in the top two pictures where you see my ancestors in front of the home that my dad grew up. And I had the privilege in grade 6 to go back to where my dad was raised with my brother and my mom, and that's my grandma in that picture. My father immigrated to Canada, and my mother eventually followed. They both met in Vancouver. The orange car you see is the car that my parents slept in when they arrived in Edmonton, because no one would rent an apartment to a young racialized couple. It's the same car my parents drove to their jobs day after day. It's the same car that drove me home from the hospital after I was born. And it's the same car that picked up my grandparents from the airport when they left India to come take care of me and my brother so my parents could work. To me, that little orange car symbolizes my need to continue to persevere, work hard, and push myself to obtain a post-secondary education, because post-secondary education was seen as a way for me to gain agency, to have freedom, and to be seen. I completed my bachelor in pharmacy with distinction here at the U of A, practiced in community pharmacy, and it was soon after graduation I was encouraged to apply for a teaching position in the Faculty of Pharmacy and Pharmaceutical Sciences by 2 students who were on clinical rotation with me. While teaching, I continued to practice in community pharmacy, started and completed my doctorate in pharmacy at the University of Colorado, Denver, and my master's in health sciences education here at the University of Alberta. I have 3 children who fill my heart. I tackle life with my partner, who's a concert chaser. He goes to a lot of concerts with me, but there's always cheap drinks there. But also my co-creator in my scholarly work, where we work in medical dermatology, with a focus on reducing disparities in dermatological care and addressing inequities in assessment and treatment of dermatological disease in patients with skin of color. Most recently, I was the Assistant Dean of Student Services in the Faculty of Pharmacy, and my team there built a student services model focused on mental health and well-being, professional growth, and academic excellence. The past 9 months in the role of the Dean of Students have been an immense time of personal and professional growth and new friendships. Reflecting on how I move through this world today, so much that has happened in my family's story was building up to that moment when that pebble was dropped in the river. The moment I entered the University of Alberta as a student in 1999. So much of what I have accomplished are ripples or waves from that moment as well. The privilege I have of uplifting our student community is one of the ripples from that moment. So why do we give of ourselves? The answer that comes to my mind and heart is a word from my first language that I learned, Punjabi. And this word is rooted in Sanskrit. It is the word seva. Seva means service, giving service, helping selflessly in a variety of ways without any reward or personal gain. These are the teachings of my grandparents and a value that is very much entrenched in my being. Seva extends not only to students I am committed to serving, but I make this commitment to anyone I meet and work with. I received Seva from this university not only as a student, but as an academic and a researcher as well. So my academic and professional journey was definitely not linear. While I was pursuing my doctorate in pharmacy and also teaching multiple courses in the Faculty of Pharmacy, my brother and only sibling passed away suddenly. And to this day, I've not been able to find words in our human languages that reflect the grief and despair of that time. I didn't recognize my life. I had difficulty letting life in. It truly took a village, multiple sports, to awaken my teachable spirit and get me going on my academic and professional journey again. My lived experience was honored here at the U of A, and I started to see myself being part of this community. As the Dean of Students, we honor the identities of our students, we respect the complexity of their social locations, we are there for them during difficult moments in their journey, but we also celebrate the moments of joy that make up their whole self. We aspire to create services and supports that are accessible to our students. We extend Seva to our students. Relationships are critical in transforming experiences. These are some of the relationships that I've developed while I've been the Dean of Students, and there's many more I need to still establish. Relationships allow us to co-create opportunities for our community where people merely go from surviving to thriving. So as I reflect on my story here, and as you take time to reflect on your story, at this moment in time, it's our collective opportunity to uplift the student experience and transform journeys here at the University of Alberta. We can reimagine how we give to uplift. I remember as a donor, a small gesture as paying for fruit during final exams for our pharmacy students actually initiated a sustained snack program for our students. There was another experience where I partnered with the Edmonton Public Schools and the program We Read, where I would rent school buses, transport pharmacy students to schools that were underserved, had a high population of newcomers. So my students could sit with these students, read to these kindergarten students, and also give them a snack. When the parents knew that university students were coming to the class to read to their children, they saw the seeds of higher education and opportunity being planted. In addition to the kindergarten class benefiting from spending time with my students were benefiting from the kindness and compassion of these young learners, which helped my pharmacy students develop skills in communication that benefited them as emerging clinicians. My story highlights that there are multiple ways to extend SEVA to our community, and I thank you for your generosity and creativity that creates these ripples, waves that transform journeys and experiences. Well, a very special evening tonight. We are delighted to have Dr. Alison Criscitiello join us to share how her work is addressing one of the biggest issues of our time, climate change. Alison is a director, a National Geographic Explorer, and an assistant professor and the director of the Canadian Ice Core Lab at the University of Alberta. As an ice core scientist and high-altitude mountaineer, she explores the history of sea ice in polar and high alpine regions using ice core chemistry. This involves long months of living in a tent and drilling ice cores in places like Antarctica, Alaska, and the Canadian high Arctic. In 2021, Alison anchored an all-female team of scientists to install the highest weather station in North America near the peak of Mount Logan, Canada's highest mountain. She returned to Mount Logan in 2022 to successfully retrieve a record-breaking 1,072-foot-long ice core that could contain one of the most important climate records on the continent, including past temperature, nearby sea surface conditions, volcanic ash fallout, and wildfire history, and will shed light on how climate change impacts even the world's highest peaks. It is my absolute pleasure to show the trailer for Alison's new documentary.
Winter, what does Mama do for work?
You do ice stuff.
I do ice stuff.
And do science.
And I do science. What is it that I drill?
You drill ice cores.
Ice cores. Do you know why?
Because you are ice core scientist.
Because I'm an ice core scientist. I was gone for a while. I missed you a lot.
He cannot get out of here under his own power.
If you miss me when I'm gone for work, what you do when you miss me.
I open presents.
Yeah. Also, you do things for me. What did you do for me?
Make cards.
You made me cards just like I made you cards. We made each other cards.
It says, "This is an elephant to help you feel better when you miss us."
Winter, why do you like sledding?
Because it's about the speed.
It is. Okay, I have an existential question for you. What would happen if we didn't have snow anymore?
What would happen?
Thank you for sharing your story. That was so beautiful. It is a real pleasure to speak with you today, and thank you for the kind introduction. I'm taking this opportunity to talk about a specific project that I'm leading, talking about climate change on Canada's highest peak, Mount Logan. And though it's me here speaking to you today, this project is very much co-led by my incredible PhD student, Kira Holland. Since this ice core made it back to the lab, she has worked tirelessly alongside me to help unlock the secrets in this new ice core record. And I'd also like to recognize that none of this work would be possible without our First Nations partners in the Yukon. This work takes place entirely on land that is very sacred and not my own. And it's a privilege to co-create knowledge with the Kluane, Champagne-Ajac, and White River First Nations and be given permission to carry out work on their land. Okay, so for this Mount Logan project, I'd like to take you through the overarching science, the expedition, and at the end, just a few quick notes about the future and what this all means. So first, let's start with the science. So why do we go through the trouble of drilling ice cores in the first place? It takes a lot of time and money and effort. Well, ice cores allow us to investigate past climate and environmental conditions prior to the 1970s, the satellite era, making them one of our most valuable tools for studying the Earth and climate and how humans have impacted both. The chemistry of ice offers an almost endless array of tools for investigating past climate. And I'm listing here just a small selection of things that we almost always analyze ice cores for. So we can reconstruct temperature and atmospheric gases, such as CO2, in the past. We can reconstruct wildfire frequency and intensity in the past. We can look at environmental contaminants over time to gain a deeper understanding of how humans are impacting even the most remote parts of the planet. And we can learn more about our world's oceans by measuring certain chemical species in ice that came from the sea. So ice cores contain global climate information, but they also have this incredible ability to tell us something more regional and local. And this is why we can't just drill one in one place on the Earth and say it's done. So these more regional and local aspects are dependent, of course, on where exactly the ice core is located on Earth. Our longest climate records come from the polar regions, where ice has remained frozen for hundreds of thousands of years. And outside of the polar regions, there are a few places that are both cold and high enough to preserve long-term climate records. Mount Logan, in the southwest corner of the Yukon and within the largest non-polar ice field in the world, is one of them. At 5,959 meters, Logan has the largest base circumference of any non-volcanic mountain on Earth, with a 20-kilometer-long summit plateau that sticks up into the free troposphere. So we've long known that Logan, with its enormous and cold, high summit plateau, may contain the longest record of North Pacific climate variability on Earth. That is, it may be able to tell us something about past climate in the North Pacific that, for example, polar ice cores cannot. This has been the highest risk, highest reward project of my career so far. The primary goal of this project was to drill an ice core on Mount Logan Summit Plateau, after locating an ideal ice coring site with this potential to offer us a long-term climate history in the North Pacific. And this is a really interesting project, in part simply because of the difficulty in drilling an ice core at the top of a nearly 20,000-foot mountain. It requires a background not only, of course, in ice core science, but also in high-altitude mountaineering. To work at altitudes like this, you have to climb the mountain, slowly acclimatizing and allowing our bodies to adjust to the lack of oxygen to be able to safely stay and work up high for weeks. So for me personally, as a former US climbing ranger and full alpine mountain guide, this aspect has been one of the most rewarding. Logan really was the place where this has all come together for me for the very first time, sort of using all of my skill sets to achieve what I wasn't quite sure was possible. So second, how did we pull this off, the expedition? In May of 2021, my climbing partner, Rebecca Haspel, and I climbed Logan and installed a weather station. This weather station sits at 18,500 feet on Prospector's Col on Mount Logan and is the highest weather station by a long shot in North America. This has helped raise the roof of human observational networks as we lack meteorological data from high mountain environments, which in many cases are located in parts of the atmosphere that are actually projected to warm the fastest, but which are mostly currently unmonitored. Rebecca and I also completed a large radar survey covering tens of miles of radar tracks on the Summit Plateau in 2021, and we summited to remeasure the height of Logan. The radar survey itself helped us to narrow down the ideal ice coring location to a small, about quarter-mile area, and we pulled these two different frequency radar systems across the plateau in a grid, allowing us to look at the internal layering of the ice, as well as the ice at depth at the bedrock interface where the oldest ice sits. In May of 2022, I took a larger team up Logan to complete the drilling. We started as a team of 7, and in addition to the main event, the drilling, we serviced this weather station, changing out the wind vane and some other parts. And we completed a final small radar survey grid on the Summit Plateau to pinpoint our exact coring location. The radar survey showed an area with ice over 300 meters deep, which is pretty spectacular for the top of a mountain, with beautiful layering all the way to the bed. After our small final grid, I committed to the drill spot, and the helicopter began to sling load in all the drill equipment in small 300-pound loads due to the 20,000-foot flying altitude. The drill itself for this project is actually modular, so at 900 pounds, we broke it into 3 300-pound loads. The generator is a load, all the fuel and other related drill equipment is a load. So it was actually quite a few sling loads to get all of this equipment up to this drill spot. Now, the climb itself to where the weather station is located takes you up to I believe, one of the most inhospitable places, not just on the mountain, but on Earth. I don't love this spot, Prospector's Call. It is a spot that typically has temperatures in the minus 40s with extreme high winds. And it is also the spot on Mount Logan that gives the mountain a very committing nature, which is that you have to go up to get down. So once you climb up to where that weather station is at 18,500 feet, you descend to the Summit Plateau. So if anyone climbing Logan develops altitude issues or anything on the plateau, they actually have to ascend to descend, which can be deadly. The crux of the route is King Col Ice Fall. There's Rebecca and I leading up through it last year. And it used to be actually quite straightforward to ski up, but it's become a mobile maze of seracs and enormous holes, due in part to melting lower down on the mountain, and an increase in the ice fall flow speed, which has caused thinning of ice falls like this. I said that 7 people started the expedition with me, and 3 people finished with me. Everyone is alive and well. Sorry, that's a bad lead up. So there were 3 spectacular high altitude medevacs of teammates. Again, they're all fine now, but they had life-threatening altitude issues. And that sounds dramatic, but this is in fact what I had planned for. I planned for 4 people making it to the end, which is what happened. And due to Logan's latitude, the altitude's impact on the body is particularly severe. This is what the Summit Plateau camp looks like. Maybe don't go in the field with me. I don't heat tents. It's not very comfortable. But this is kind of my normal style. There's a nice aerial of it. Well, everyone shares a personal sleeping tent, and then there's a communal dome cooking tent. And in this case, there's a second dome tent, which is floorless, that I actually set the drill up in simply to avoid losing drill days to storms, which are very frequent on Logan. As we drilled, it became quickly apparent that with only 4 people sort of slowly deteriorating due to the altitude, we needed to complete the drilling as quickly as possible. So we split into 2 teams of 2 and kept the drill running for 14 hours a day, alternating every 3 hours. And that allowed us to kind of rest our bodies between drill shifts and drill more hours per day than we normally would on polar expeditions. As we drilled, we kept the ice packaged in those kind of ice core boxes on the surface. And every single time there was a weather window and at least 300 pounds of ice sitting there at the surface, I had the helicopter come in and take it to a freezer unit we had staged. So with this freezer sea can stationed pretty far away at a park runway, and Kira and a technician there babysitting it, receiving all the ice, we were actually able to take advantage of all the good weather to fly ice off the Summit Plateau, which meant that once we reached the bottom, we weren't stuck up there for weeks, which would have been the case, flying what was over a ton of ice off the plateau. So in fact, we actually flew the final ice off the Summit Plateau the day we completed the drilling. We were able to, break down and pack the drill in the high camp in a half a day, and then we skied off the mountain to base camp that very afternoon. And we got lucky with the weather that evening and actually flew out of that night from base camp. So it took 9 days to climb, 2 weeks up there drilling, and what I get asked every time, 7 hours to ski from summit to base. That's the fun part. The ice fall's not actually that fun to ski. But yeah, 7 hours down. The adventure of climbing Logan several times in the name of science and the allure of what we may learn from this new ice core have sparked an absolute avalanche of interest, of curiosity, of collaboration, and of wonder. And it is perhaps the last one, the wonder, that I am so proud of, as it is reached across disciplines, backgrounds, and ages. So here's a quick overview of where we're at with the project. I didn't want to get too sciencey here. I would note this is actually quite fast for a core of this length. Usually with polar ice cores that are around this depth, it takes several years just to get to this point. So the field components were completed by the end of 2022, with the 327 meter long ice core arriving here at University of Alberta by the first week of June, almost beating me home. And then by the start of last year, of 2023, Kira and I had completed all of the priority analyses of the ice core, which includes things like major elements, black carbon, stable isotopes, major ions, and a lot more. We're currently finishing the dating of the ice core and doing the gas measurements. So just a very last little comment on the future, I suppose. Why does this matter, and why do we focus on high mountain regions? Why is it worth it? While places that look like this, like Logan's summit, look seemingly untouched by anything, including warming, even the highest points on Earth are impacted by climate change. And not only this, but many of these high mountain regions are warming at faster rates than lower elevations due to a process known as elevation-dependent warming. So people very commonly ask me if it's too late, if changes that we make in our own lives right now will even make a difference. Well, it's not too late, but the timeline to act is now. We have very little time not just to take personal action in our own lives, but to do whatever we can to help push the policy needle toward the side of environmental sustainability and protection. And I would say if anyone is looking for a singular source on the state of our planet and a roadmap forward, I would urge you to have a look at the most recent International Panel for Climate Change, or IPCC, report. Again, I am a single person presenting work that took an enormous team to pull off. So a huge thanks to everyone who has been a part of this. Most importantly, the University of Alberta and National Geographic and Rolex through their Perpetual Planet expeditions. And if people are interested in the film that you saw the trailer to, the worldwide premiere is at the Banff Film Fest this fall, and then it will be more available after that. Thank you so much.
In terms of bringing the core samples back, how much time do you have to maintain them as best as you can to get them, like where do they go from there? Do they come here directly or, yeah, just curious.
Yep, they came straight to South Academic Building. Every project has a whole nightmare of cold chain logistics. In this particular case, the ice all ended up in this freezer unit that I had stationed in the middle of nowhere, but it was picked up by a truck and basically came here the same way that we ship frozen perishable food around the world. It came from the St. Elias across the country straight to the lab right here.
I think from a research perspective, we know researchers faced an uphill battle, well, no pun intended for this presentation, but in a lot of areas, whether it's funding or availability or grad students. So having an extra element of such a physicality to your work, what does that look like in even recruiting the team that have not only the science background, but then the physical training and ability to ski down a mountain in 7 hours? What does that kind of intersectionality look like? Yeah, so curious.
Thank you for that question. I also would note that the parents of one of my new master's students are in the audience, so. And she just came back from Axel Heiberg Island, a very remote island where I did not go with her. I went with her last year. I mean, this project is sort of the more extreme on the risk end of the work I do. In fact, the polar work that's run out of the Canadian Ice Core Lab here is sort of less risky and takes less specialized skill sets. So in this case, I was unable to bring students with me. But what I did to sort of fill that gap, because it's such a wonderful sort of learning and teaching opportunity, is Kira and other students came with me, and I flew them into base camp with me. And when I went up, they went down. So I, with Kira, kind of developed a project that was safe, hired a mountain guide to go with them. And they did this surface transect from Logan's base camp down to the ocean, down the Seward Glacier. Even with extreme projects like this where I am not allowed to bring students, I do find a way to train them in the field as well. I would say, for the most part, I am able to bring people and train them. And the Ice Core Lab here is Canada's first national Ice Core Lab. So we are at the beginning of training the next generation of Ice Core scientists, and for the very first time here in Canada.
How long can you keep those cores?
Well, we have cores here in the archive from the 1960s. We can keep them for a long time. So the Ice Core Lab here, it has 2 rooms, and one of them is a -40 archive room, and it has 2 kilometers of ice in it right now. And so the way that we preserve the ice, and the reason for that temperature, is to keep them preserved over long time periods. And that deep cold allows gases not to migrate and certain chemistry not to migrate. So we can actually keep the ice archived for a really long time. And something I didn't mention, which I love about Ice Core science and is always true, is that we use as little sample as possible. We're almost done analyzing everything we're going to analyze in this record, and we have 52% of the ice left. So we preserve as much as we can for future generations who will be able to do much more than we are able to do today. And hence some of the efforts here at U of A to have rooms like that can preserve it for many, many decades.
It doesn't sublime at all?
It would sublimate, except that every single meter is vacuum sealed in plastic and then is in these specialized ice core tubes. I should have showed a photo of the lab, but I can walk people down to it after. Actually, if we make fake ice for cleaning saws and things like that in there, and if you just leave ice out, it sublimates in like a week because it's so dry. So you're totally right. We have put a lot into protecting it.
I'm just curious, the why. 2 weeks of drilling, 14 hours a day, 7 hours of skiing.
It's a hard sell.
In terms of your motivation, right? Keeping up, that's a lot of work, right?
Yeah.
So your why?
God, that really is a hard sell. I mean, I didn't say much about my background. I said like a quick sentence, but I have spent much of my life until I got here in the position that I have here, in this kind of leadership role that I have here, jumping between 2 parts of my life that I never thought would come together. I had an undergrad in a broad environmental science. I became a U.S. mountain guide and climbing ranger, and I did that for years before I burnt out kind of on the only physical job and decided to go back to school to study these places that I loved and was watching change. But I mean, even in the PhD program I was in Boston, I would take months off to go on expeditions, and I was just constantly ping-ponging between these things I loved, and I really never thought they would come together. And the way it has happened here is that I'm able to lead a group here, you know, out of our national lab that's doing something that no other national Ice Core labs are doing anywhere, this high altitude kind of work that actually requires both things. I love, I mean, it looks kind of awful, and like there's a lot of suffering, but I really like it.
Alison, I'm not gonna lie, you are selling it. And sometimes on the darkest days in the Dean of Students, I wouldn't mind being up there. And I'm really looking forward to the story that ICE will tell. So incredible and phenomenal. Thank you so much for sharing your story and research. Well, Alison is going to join the panel again, and what I'd like to do is actually introduce our panelists to you. So as I say your name, please come and join us. So the women joining our panel today are strong leaders in their community, and I greatly admire how they live their values. These women have made it their mission to break down barriers and to move the needle for students and researchers. So I'll have Alison join us first. And then we have Bridget Casey, 2010 BSc. Bridget Casey is an award-winning Canadian fintech entrepreneur that has been creating financial content online for more than 10 years. She has over 100,000 followers across TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Bridget holds a bachelor's in science from the University of Alberta and an MBA in finance from the University of Calgary. She's been featured as a millennial financial expert by Time Money, Forbes, and Yahoo. And finance, and Business Insider, Maclean, CBC, and BNN. Phenomenal. Bridget was recognized as one of Alberta's top young innovators in 2016. Welcome. Then we have Anjum Malik, 1999 MSc, Master's in Science. Anjum Malik is an environmental engineer and executive leader with 25 years of cross-functional experience in the private, public, and startup sectors. She has developed and successfully led numerous environmental, social, and governance strategies and has held leadership roles at Worley, the City of Edmonton, Growing Greener Innovations, and Common Good Mining. She is currently the Business Operations Manager at Aurora Hydrogen. Anjum is also a board member with Engineers Canada and has held previous board positions with the Alberta Environmental Appeals Board, the Canadian Centre for Women in Science, Engineering, Trades and Technology, and Clean Prosperity Canada, where she was chair of the Governance Committee. Anjum is motivated by purpose and impact. She is passionate about equity, diversity, and inclusion, and in particular, increasing the number of women in not only engineering and science-related professions, but in leadership. Welcome again, Anjum. And we have Ashton Rudenek, 2012 BCom, 2016 MBA, today's moderator of the panel. Ashton Rudenek is a proud alumni of the Alberta School of Business. After getting her start in marketing with local nonprofit organizations, she worked as a consultant delivering marketing and communication solutions to a diverse portfolio of clients. Upon graduating from the MBA program, Ashton worked as a director, recruitment, admissions, and marketing within the Alberta School of Business, where she promoted the master's degree programs to prospective students. Ashton joined Alberta Investment Management Corporation, AIMCO, in 2017 as a responsible investment analyst. Her current role is Director, Sustainable Investing. An active volunteer, Ashton is president of the University of Alberta Alumni Association, fundraising committee co-chair for the AIMCO Foundation for Financial Education, and a board director with the Svita Housing Foundation. Please join me in welcoming Ashton. All right, I'll hand it over to all of you.
Thank you so much, Ravina, and I loved hearing your story as well. I really appreciate you sharing. And Alison, my goodness, how do we follow this? I don't even know, and I definitely want to check out that documentary. So thank you for sharing your important work that you're doing. Today's conversation is about women in philanthropy, and I'm really pleased that we can start talking about what you're passionate about in terms of your giving, whether that's your time, your talent, or your financial resources. And so to get started, I really want to dig in with Bridget and Anjum about, can you share the areas that you support here at the university and why?
Sure. I started an award and I give it to a science or business student every year because those are the faculties that I have degrees from. For me, it was really important because I see university as the reason I was able to achieve what I have in my career. I grew up very low income. Neither of my parents even finished high school, so it was a very big deal for me to go to university. And I just feel like I couldn't have achieved what I have in my career without the university, and so supporting students on that journey and knowing how meaningful and how impactful it could be for them is what created my gift.
Yeah, I'm very motivated through gender diversity, as you heard in my bio. So we've donated to the Faculty of Native Studies for a woman going into either environmental engineering or environmental studies, because that's something that's very near and dear to us. And donations to WISES, the Women in Science, Engineering, Scholarship, and Technology.
Wonderful. And for myself, I'm also a donor, whether it's through annual giving campaigns, whatever one that I feel is a great case for support for the moment. I love supporting diverse causes. Like both of you, I really am passionate about increasing gender diversity, and I have left a gift to the University of Alberta in my will. Like both of you, I feel that the University of Alberta gave me so many opportunities, and I really want to pay that forward for next generations. And I'm a mother myself, and I hope that my sons have the opportunity to attend this wonderful institution, and that their future children and grandchildren as well will be able to benefit from the wonderful learning opportunities here. I know you both mentioned the faculties and some of the issues, so you talked about gender diversity, but Bridget, is there any other specific issue or area within business or science?
Well, I think mine gave preference to chemistry and finance, because again, those are my degrees. There's a lot of ego driving that award, which is one of the things you can do when it's your money, right? You can say whatever. And I think preference is also given to a woman or an individual who identifies as a woman with dependents, because I'm a single mother. I wasn't a single mother when I went through school, but being a single mother, I can imagine what that would entail. So preference is given to someone with dependents just to make that a little bit easier as well.
Wonderful. And any other specific issues? I know you mentioned Indigenous students and whatnot, but other issues that you're passionate about?
Yeah, I mean, it falls under the umbrella, I guess, of just smashing the patriarchy coming from
That's what we're all doing here.
coming from the field of engineering. There's just very few non-men, to be quite frank, and looking at it from an intersectional lens, there's just significant barriers when you layer those things upon one another. And similarly to what we've heard here, I really believe education is what gives people economic independence, and it's very important for me to see that for equity-deserving people.
Absolutely. Alison, how has philanthropy played a role in your research?
Philanthropy has actually played an enormous role in my research. I'm originally American, sorry. I'm Canadian now. I only admit that because it actually took me a little while to sort of learn the funding landscape here for the hard sciences and for doing big science like this. And it's really different than what I was used to in the States. It has absolutely required family foundations and individual donors supporting students, supporting the lab or particular research projects that really speak to people. Projects even like this absolutely would not have happened without people's giving. It's unbelievable, and there's no other way that I have found to do it here in Canada.
Very important. And I can only imagine the cost of that type of research. You're talking about helicopters and even the physical equipment that you need and the amount of personnel. So I can only imagine the importance that philanthropy will have to pay to continue all of that work.
Yes.
Well, Bridget, you mentioned the award you set up, and I'm curious if you have any success stories of the impacts this award has made. I'm sure you get some donor communication from time to time.
That's actually the best part of the whole thing, and one of the reasons I recommend giving young when you can. Like, it's awesome to set up a legacy gift, and I'll be doing that as well. But being able to give now when I'm young, I actually get to meet the students. And so I've had 2 scholarship recipients as well, and I've met each of them. It was, I think, one of the most meaningful experiences. See, I can't even talk about it without crying, because I feel so maternal to them now. They're like my other daughters. And I'm so interested in like their careers and their growth. Like, I keep in touch with both of them regularly. It's really cool to think that because I started this gift in my 30s, that I have so many decades ahead of me, and I just have years and years and years of being able to really see the impact. And my selfish dream, what I'm really working towards, is so I can host annual dinners of all my recipients so that they can meet each other, and then we'll just have this like little power network of successful women. And yeah, it's just been really cool to hear from them and just to see that impact in real time. Like, that's the most rewarding thing, is because I've met them, I've spoken to them, they've told me firsthand how meaningful my gift was to them, and there's no better money I've ever spent in my life.
I love that. And for them, that vote of confidence or having that cheerleader and mentor in their corner and that relationship with you, I think is also equally as important. And I love that you get to hear these stories and live them. And what better stewardship can there be? Stewardship is not just thank you, it's thank you, and here's the impact that you made. And they very much are telling you firsthand that impact. And since they have dependents too, you're impacting their children's lives.
Yeah, and it's been really cool to give, because then they're inspired right away. Like they're young, they're 22, they don't even have money yet, and they're like, I'm gonna set up a gift like this when I can afford to do that. So you're already building a legacy that's going to ripple out in such a big way. And you get to see it. That's the coolest part, is you get to see it happen.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I have a question for all of you. Maybe we'll start with you this time, Anjum, but how do you involve your family or your community in your giving efforts? And how do you inspire others to join you in this giving journey?
My father's an engineer, and so he's very structured and plans. As he was thinking about his estate and wanting to very generously start divesting of assets, I suggested that instead of giving, it's nice to receive money, of course, but that perhaps we would do something more impactful while he was still alive and he could see the impacts. And so combined efforts set up these endowments. And then at my alma mater, I went to the University of Waterloo, set up an endowment through our class. I think it's very important when you talk about community, it's sharing those stories and sharing the impact and the value and the joy it brings to you. And that causes other people to say, you know what, maybe I could do something like this. And maybe, it doesn't have to be these huge legacy gifts. It can be something very small that you start, as you mentioned, when you're younger and maybe not as financially stable. But I think it's really being creative with how you define philanthropy and how you're going to give back.
Wonderful. Bridget.
I have a shortcut because I have such a large online following. It's pretty easy to influence people in that respect. Like, my charitable giving is something I do. I'm very outspoken about publicly, and like I have a podcast with one of my best friends, and again, I talk on my Instagram about it all the time. I'm actually doing something right now where I'm donating every day to help families escape war in Gaza, and I'm posting that and encouraging people to donate. And I'm like, even if you can't do a large donation, like I see some people giving $5, and that's still meaningful. And I really encourage people to be intentional about their giving. I work in personal finance, so I'm always talking to people about their budgets and their investments. And we tend to always think of like, how do I afford a house? How do I have children? How do I afford retirement? We never think of being intentional with our charitable dollars. It's kind of that just gets left over, whatever's at the end of our budget. Oh, I can give $5 to someone that's asking in that exact moment. What I really encourage people to do is make it a line item in your budget. Think seriously, what percentage of my income do I want to give each year? And you can do gross, because many are tax deductible, so you can give more than you think. Actually planning, do I want to do monthly gifts to something? Do I want to do large one-time donations? And just being intentional with your charitable dollars and doing that as part of your budget every year and throughout your life, instead of just being like, oh, I hope there's some left over to give.
Alison, how about you? Any comments on giving and involving your family and community?
I guess the only thing I can maybe add is, in some way, it's not just money sometimes. For myself, where that isn't the case, just where I'm at with my family and career, kind of the way that I've tried to give and also involve my family was by starting an organization called Girls on Ice Canada, which I can talk more about later. But the point really being, sometimes it's more using the skills that we have in our time, and I think that in some cases that can also be impactful.
Talk about it now. What is it?
it.
Tell us about it. I want to know now.
I can't. Okay.
You can.
Okay, so in 2015, myself and two other Canadian women got this nonprofit off the ground, which I think was my response to feelings driven by this question, kind of, and a real hope in trying to increase diversity in STEM fields. So there was a US program started about 20 years ago called Girls on Ice, and I was just even as an undergrad, I was like a volunteer reader of applications, and there were over 300 Canadian applications per year for a very small program. This is a program for female identifying high schoolers, and it's a completely free program from the moment they step out their door. They get high school credit for it, and it's a scientific expedition, sort of 2-week program. So I was seeing all these Canadian applications and knew upon moving permanently to Canada, there was no like really, really low barrier program like this for female identifying high schoolers. So I worked for 3 years to raise enough. Just made one.
There wasn't one, so I just made one.
It took years. But actually, this is an interesting point. I didn't know I was going to talk about this. It took a private family foundation funding the pilot year of this program to show both the huge need across Canada, largely in the North and in First Nations communities, and show the impact. And in year 2, it received federal funding. We are a federally funded program now that has tripled.
That's amazing.
Yeah, but it took.
Wow.
It took, it takes someone taking a risk on you, which often isn't going to be a National Science Foundation or something. And we wouldn't be where we were without a gift, truly, in year 1. That's where I put my effort, and my family is involved, even my daughter. You can volunteer in all sorts of ways for organizations like this, but.
I love that. That's incredible, and exposing that age group to STEM early on is very important. If they can see it, they can be it, and getting that early exposure, I think, is very important. So thank you for sharing that. It's very inspiring. And you mentioned something really important, is that philanthropy takes on different forms. So it's not just financial, but also giving the gift of your time and your talent. And here's where I get to do a little bit of bragging about our alumni community. That's 300,000 strong. I'm not sure if you had a chance to read our U of A Alumni Impact Survey, but the results are really quite incredible to see the impact that our alumni make on not just a local scale, but a global scale too. And some of that is financial, but the stats that really speak to me as someone who has spent a lot of time volunteering in the community, and especially when I worked in the not-for-profit space, is that 86% of those alums surveyed, had volunteered in the last year. And they gave over $979 million in charitable donations.
Oh my God.
Oh, wow.
And that's not just donations all to the U of A. I must caveat that. We'd love for them to be all to the U of A, by the way.
Wow.
But what I really am thrilled about with that is it speaks to what I think is essential about this Edmonton community, and you'll hear me say it lots, is I think in Edmonton and in Alberta in general, is you're judged more by what you give than what you earn. So really how you are seen in society and the connections that you make is people put a lot of I guess, they honor people who are giving to the community, whether that's through time, financial resources, and talent. And really who exemplifies that are grads, and many of you are grads in this room. So I'm super proud of that. I want to see that number even increase to 100%, I'm sure it will, and those donations to keep coming. But to those of you who are comprising the statistic by giving gifts and by volunteering, I just want to say thank you, truly thank you for all that you're doing. And Anjum, to you, I want to just unpack a little bit about advocacy in terms of giving your time and your talent. So financial resources as well can further advocacy, but if you could speak to me a bit about how you're engaging with issues directly beyond that financial contribution.
As I mentioned, there's just a common theme. It's about diversity in STEM and in engineering in particular. This ties into one of, I think, the other questions or some of the other things that people are saying is starting young and really understanding where your values are and what interests you, and spending some time volunteering with those organizations. So when I was in my undergrad, I didn't realize at the time articulating my values or my purpose at the time, but education was very important. And so, we had this volunteer program where you could partner with a high school girl and when you were in second year engineering, and show them around and show them that it's not scary and you could do this. Then as I progressed in my education, when I came to here in Edmonton, volunteered with the regulatory association that oversees engineers and geoscientists doing student outreach to schools, science and engineering presentations. Again, you said it, you can't be what you can't see. So being visible, that again, engineering doesn't look a certain way. You can be however you are and be successful and have interests in those areas. And then moving on, started to work with organizations like the Canadian Centre for Women in Science, Engineering, Trades and Technology, chairing the Women in PEGA advisory group. So there's just that thread around education and diversity in STEM. And now I'm in a position financially that I can donate sums of money to make a difference in other people's lives in that fashion.
Wonderful. I love seeing that alignment between your volunteerism, the mentorship that you're doing with those issues that you care most about, and then also giving the financial gift as well that follows that same theme. So I really appreciate hearing all of these perspectives today. And I will do probably one more question for each of you that we can all answer, and then maybe I'll turn it over to the audience because I'm sure you have some burning questions as well. But how can we make philanthropy more inclusive? We all are very passionate about diversity, equity, inclusion, but how can we make it more inclusive to address a wider range of issues and communities? So maybe, Bridget, I'll start with you.
I don't know if I know the answer. That's a really good question. The best that I'm doing is just trying to be outspoken of it and looking at so many different causes, because I think that's what's overwhelming, is there's so many things that deserve your time and your dollars, and just simply having more conversations about it gives you more exposure to it. Like, I'm learning so much even here, and hearing from what other people are spending their time and their efforts and their money on can help me make decisions with my own gifts and hopefully inspire others to do the same. People know better than me. I was just an attendee at this event last year, so I'm new.
But I think what you said at the beginning was important, is that you don't have to wait till later in life. You could start early. You can start smaller than maybe what you could give later on in life, but that still makes an impact, especially given the runway, the amount of time that you have for that gift to really accumulate to.
Yeah, I think it's actually better to start earlier, even if it means leaving a lesser gift later in life, because the need is right now, right? Like, all the needs are right now, and it even feels like we're in a time where a lot of those needs are getting worse. It's getting more difficult and less equitable. So postponing your gift 40, 50, 60 years, I think that's a risky gamble. I think it's better to give less now, not only because you can see it, but because it might prevent a lot of the issues that are in the future, because it can solve problems right now.
Anjum, your thoughts?
Yeah, I really liked this question when it got sent around.
Yeah, this is your jam.
I mentioned this earlier. I think we really have to reflect on how we're defining philanthropy, and I think traditionally it's these large legacy gifts, a certain type of demographic, and understanding that philanthropy is much broader than that. I think we have to look at it from an intersectional lens. We talked about this as well earlier. Who's in the room and who's not in the room when we're making these decisions? Look at the communities that you think you're wanting to serve, and who are you working with from those communities to understand what the barriers are and what the concerns are. Because we can often, I speak from a place of privilege. We've set up endowments at universities. What are the barriers for these girls to even get to that point? And so I think it's really imperative that we work with the communities that we're trying to serve, right? Nothing about us without us.
For sure. I now want to turn it over to the audience. If you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand. I think there's a mic that we can run around, and for any of the panelists.
Hello, I'm just wondering if our donations or people's education around philanthropy would be increased if we had some research showing things like, for example, when WISES was started by Gail Powley, she was talking about the positive outcomes that she was seeing when they had a female in the room. It wasn't always positive, but eventually it turned around. And I'm thinking about another research that was just announced that they were showing that if 35% of females are on a surgical team, although it's not a clinical statistically improvement, there was a 3% improvement in patient outcomes. If we start these Girls on Ice and these lovely, the not-for-profit things that you're talking about, if we can show what happens when these girls actually have the education.
Yeah, I think that's imperative, is that we demonstrate the impact and tell the story. So
empirically, yes.
Yeah, I love that suggestion. I know that that's really going to be behind the momentum of securing these gifts for the future and the long-term sustainability of these research programs and volunteer programs.
Yeah, and WISES certainly does that, which was actually started by Dr. Margaret Ann Armour. Gail Powley started WISER. But they are close, I can understand the confusion. WISES puts on several events where they feature girls that went through their, I think it's called STEP program, which is for grade 6 students, and then they have a high school program. And many of these girls, who then of course become young women, go and pursue STEM careers, and it is very moving to hear the impact.
And I think it's important because it's moving, but that is qualitative.
Well, I think talking about diversity, I think we place a lot of emphasis on quantitative data. Qualitative data is just as impactful. And we talk about barriers and stakeholder engagement. So
I agree with you. I'm just thinking that not everybody has accepted the qualitative data.
Yeah, it's time.
Sometimes.
That's GBA plus analysis.
Yeah. Thank you.
I just have a question from a mom perspective, since you all have children. How do you talk to them about philanthropy or serving your community? Anjum, you talk about your dad being philanthropic and it's a family decision. How does that kind of translate to the younger generation?
My daughter will be 16 next week. From a young age, we talked about volunteering, and so we found opportunities where they were age appropriate or allowed, and giving back to the community. Ravina talked about this in South Asian culture. There is something called seva. It's something that's sort of ingrained in you from a young age, that you go to the temple, you serve your elders, you help in the kitchen. Those are all things that lead to philanthropy, because it's about empathizing about those who are in need and giving in the manner that is appropriate, that you can at the time, whether that's, like I said, serving your elders at the temple, or now moving on to, you said a portion of, setting aside. We started giving her an allowance at a young age, primarily so she could understand economic power, not be like demanding $40 Lego sets when she was 3 years old. And a portion goes into her little angel fund, and she decides at the end of the year where that money will get donated. And we started that when she was 3.
Oh, wow.
I'm going to do that with my son now.
It's $2, right,
Yeah.
per month, but at the end of the year, it amounts to something, and she recognizes it's easy to put money aside if you plan for it.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately for my daughter, she has a mother that's irrationally obsessed with socioeconomic data. I'm trying to teach my 6-year-old about wealth inequality. So, and she's starting to get it. She knows. So we have conversations all the time, because I'm trying to show her that we have a moral responsibility to give back, because we exist in a capitalist system that is fundamentally unfair. And for us to have the advantages and privileges that we do, especially her life is completely different than mine ever was growing up. We have a responsibility to give back. And she sees me do it by example. She knows I'm at this event tonight and we're talking about Mummy's Giving. She knows I have the scholarship that helps people go to school. I always emphasize that I'm putting as much money into her RESP as I'm donating to the school, so I'm helping two girls equally. So at this point, because she's so young, I think the example is the most important thing, and the message. I haven't gotten into like dividing. She does get an allowance, but we don't budget it yet. I have seen her give it away though. She's donated it to people who have been in need when we're out. So I know that she understands the message, but I think depending on your child's age, yeah, it's just about the communication and the example. And then as they get older, you can get into the actual numbers of it. My personal rule for me is to give 10% of my gross income, which is large or small depending on your perspective. So that is what I'm going to be teaching her as she grows up too. But right now, I think the example is the most important thing for an elementary school age child.
I agree as well. I think for me, it's mostly trying to just be my whole self and keep doing the work I do, despite some people thinking as a mom that it's too risky. But I feel very firmly that I need to keep doing the work I do.
They never say that to a man.
Of course they wouldn't.
No.
But she, Winter is 5 now, and she has said to me, Mama, diverse groups of people do better science. And that's not a phrase I said to her, but she has seen that, I think mostly through the Girls on Ice Canada work. She has fully seen that through what I've put my efforts and energy into. So I think the example piece is unbelievably powerful in just, being who we are in them.
Children are watching us closely.
Yeah.
So it's important that you do what you really believe in, and they're going to be watching.
Yeah,
sure.
the message of service is one that I hope to pass on to my children, and my parents did that for me. My parents were always volunteering in the community. They were donating as well, and so that's something that I saw. And then when I got to high school, I went to a high school that had a leadership program and one where we did hundreds of hours of community service, and then we just kept going and going. And I do tell my son when I'm going to the university, and it was funny, he told his daycare the other day that Mama works at the university. I'm a volunteer. I don't work here, but it's great that you know about the university. And I brought him to U of A days, for instance, so he can see at a young age the impact of a university education. And that's why events like that are so important, to bring children to campus so that they can see this is a place for me, especially when they see all the diverse groups of people that exist in this ecosystem. And so I hope both my sons see that gift or acts of service are important for living a worthwhile life. So thank you very much, Alison, Bridget, Anjum. This was a wonderful conversation, and I'm leaving very inspired with some tips for myself on giving. So thank you again for your time.
Thank you again to all of our panelists. I definitely feel inspired, and I know you inspired many sitting here today. As we finish our program today, I invite you to think about how you are uniquely posed to be an agent of change. How do you live your values, and how does your philanthropy reflect this? How are you a leader for your community? And what does philanthropy mean to you? Thank you again for joining us today, taking part in the storytelling. Thank you.